So today I have a very special guest on a topic which most YouTube channels don't even go to. Hardly anybody in the Tesla sphere is talking about the solar side of Tesla. Because why? Well, because it's still losing money. And most of us want to talk about the things that are making money or that are going to be making money really, really soon. So I have brought on today a special guest, Babe Kilgore. Did I get that right?
You got it right, man. A lot of people are weirded out, but it is Babe.
Okay. And we talked about this in the green room. That is your actual name.
That is my actual name.
All right. Well, congratulations, I think.
Maybe.
All right. Well, it's a great name because, you know, that's everybody calls you Babe, whether they know your name or not. Hey, Babe.
It's very endearing. You know, the calls I make when I make that late night call to an employee of mine or somebody and they answer, "Hey, Babe," and their spouse is like, wait a minute, who are you talking to? Like, no, I promise, it's Babe.
Yeah. Well, yes, we could. Yeah. Okay. So if you like this kind of content, you know what to do. You need to like, you need to subscribe, you need to hit the notify button because we've got some great content coming up tomorrow on Monday. Let's dive into the content for today. So, Babe, I got interested in talking to you because I started a conversation with one of your, I guess he's an employee, who I thought, boy, this guy knows a ton about solar. And he says, well, if you think I know a lot, you need to talk to my boss. So I've been digging for months now into the whole solar side of things because my sense was, what has happened to solar? I put my solar roof on in, I think, 2012. I have a rental in West LA, and I put the solar on that, I think in 2012. And, you know, at the time I thought like everybody in my subdivision would have solar and then everybody in the Western region would have solar. And yet I'm now living in Riverside where we have sun 900 days out of the year. Yeah. And I hardly see any solar even in Riverside. So what in the heck is going on, Babe? Why hasn't solar popped?
You know, there's so many variables to solar, right? And I call it the solar coaster because it is changing often too. And so you've got utility influence, you've got city and state influence on policy, right? What they allow you to produce and credit back to utility. They govern utilities as, you know, monopolies that the vast majority are. You've got costs, you've got, you know, the feds raising rates have had an influence, but, you know, solar has actually done really well. So as a whole, solar has grown substantially the last 10 years. You know, I've been in it about 16 or 17 years now, which isn't a super long time to be in an industry, but for solar, I'm kind of one of the OGs because it's just not been around that long, right? But steady growth. And it's been actually better than most people had forecasted.
Wow.
So, and sometimes it's hard. You don't notice it on roofs as much because the take rate, most states are at 2, 3, 4% adoption rate. For where we're at in the solar life cycle of the industry, we're actually doing okay. And I do think it will be gangbusters over the next 10 years. So this policy passed in August, Inflation Reduction Act, massive boost to solar. They forecast the industry will be 5 times as large as it is today in 10 years.
I see.
Yeah, but it's not been perfect. Last year, 2022, was the first year there was a decline in solar installation, 16% down for 2022.
And what do you think that was due to? Was it due to people waiting for the new act to go into place so they could save money? Or, I mean, what was going on?
No, I mean, there might be some of that on a smaller scale, but I would think there's 2 super large factors. Number one, in 2022, there was a tariff problem. So we've had this tariff that we've imposed on with China, right? So right. You import something from China in solar, it's got a tariff to it, specifically solar panels. And China dominates the solar production. They control 80% of the solar manufacturing in the world. 97%.
Now, is that at the cell level? Is that at the panel level? So come in and people make panels. I mean, how does that work?
For any manufacturing related to solar, 80%. For the wafer itself that creates a solar cell, they make 97% of the world's solar wafers. The US has not produced one since 2016.
Wow.
Now that's changing, right? 3 factories are being built here. There was some additional policy, and it gives some tax breaks and incentives. Hanwha, Qcell, both South Korean companies are building factories here. And then Bill Gates is funding one called Cubic PV. These will be solar cell panel manufacturing companies established here in the US, hopefully to get some of that. But at 97%, that, I mean, come on, man, I could round up to 100 really, really easily. But for 2022, I would think the 2 biggest factors are number one, this tariff that I was talking about. The administration had looked at retroactively penalizing people that were bypassing this tariff. So they're taking components out of China that are made there, running them through Southeast Asian countries, finishing the production, and then bringing them in and saying these aren't, made in China. And they threatened to add a 200% tariff on those products. So Randy, not joking, there were hundreds of boats parked in the ocean, full and stacked of containers of solar equipment that turned around and went to other countries.
Wow.
So there was a period of time last year, 3-4 months, it was tough to find panels. For the panel class we sell, I called and bought every container in the country I could find to get through it, and I still ran out of panels.
Wow.
So that created a massive decline in installations, which dropped what we could put in for capacity in 2022, dropped down. So we had a 16% decline. And that, that's kind of mostly attributed to utility scale, large scale solar. Residential was actually up 40% last year in the US, 40%. So people are still, it's catching more traction. So that's probably the biggest influence. And then number 2 is Q3 and Q4, as Fed's raised rates, that has impacted sales significantly.
Yeah.
And it's hurting us today.
So let's just for fun, I'm interested in utility level for sure, but I was mostly shocked. My shock is more about the rooftop, the residential solar, that it hasn't. 40% is a great year. Let's face it. Everybody would like to have that kind of year, but that it hasn't become more ubiquitous than it has. Mm-hmm. Let's start just for fun with some of the detail on residential solar today.
Sure.
If a person has what amount of what size utility bill does a person have to have generally to make sense at this point?
It really depends on where you live. So you're going to have different sun hours, right? Yep. If you live in that sun belt, much easier to pencil. In California, higher rates, Hawaii, easier to pencil. Texas, deregulated, tougher to pencil, but they've got grid instability. There's other motivators there, right? But really, if you don't have a bill that averages above $125 for just electricity, probably not worth it, And then really, I would never advise to get solar. If you're going to move in 2 years, oh man, I don't think you should get solar. I mean, you could, but I don't think you've had enough time to get the payback. You've got to get the tax credits if you purchase, which that's what I would advise to purchase. You got to get the tax credits back. You have enough time to save, and you will get value from the home for sure. There are grips of studies that validate that. But if you're planning on moving, it's not worth doing. And that's some of the factors that come into it. And then probably the single biggest one on traction is it's hard for people to pay for it. Mm-hmm. Qualifying for financing. You got to have a credit score of really 600, 620 at the bare minimum with low debt to income ratio. And although that's, not super high of a score for the general population that wants to save $25 a month or $80 a month on power, that is interested in that, that's that class of people that really benefit from it. And so it's hard to finance for them.
So then there was a whole period of time, I think it was the, Tesla predecessor that was basically renting it to people, or they would put it up and guarantee the monthly payment. I can't remember now, but I didn't do it that way on my rental. But a lot of people were doing it that way. They were they weren't going to own it at the end of 7 years or 20 years. It was always going to be owned by the utility that put it on the roof. Is that still happening, or is that gone?
Yeah, so that was popular. That 2010, 11, 12, 13, that was probably 60-70% of solar installations. Is
Wow.
two models there. One is called the PPA, Power Purchase Agreement, and they say, we'll put the system up for free. The power produces, you're just going to buy that from us, and you're paying PG&E, you're paying some utility, 27 cents, and we're going to sell it to you for 17 or 19. But they have an escalator that raises, most of them do, right? 0.9, 1.9, 2.9% every year. So it's kind of like you're exchanging for a cheaper utility.
Yeah.
And there's a place for that. You don't have tax credits, you don't want to deal with it, but that has since flipped. Nowadays, 60, 70, 75% plus are all purchasing systems because there's such a long-term benefit. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. In fact, I'll use a reference I learned from you. I'll use an ICE example, an internal combustion engine gas example. If I had a bill, or when I turned 16, I had a 1972 Bronco, right? Still my favorite model car. I do love Tesla. I own a Tesla, for the record, for the folks listening at home. But if somebody came to me when I was 16 and said, hey, you can buy your power, or you can buy your gas for this vehicle. It's $1 a gallon right now, but you can pay $1.20 and you can have it set for that price for 20 years. And then after that, gas is free forever. Well, that's a smoking deal. I would take that deal all day long. And that's owning a system, is you get the benefit of ownership with no solar bill once that's paid off.
Yeah.
Really hard to economically invalidate that model, because I'm spending that money with utility either way. I'm giving that money away either to utility, or I take the same money and I just repurpose it to upgrade my house. It's more valuable. I own the system. When people understand that complicated conversation, it's kind of a no-brainer. And as horrible as this is to sound, if I meet with 10 people or 10 big companies or 10 power plants we're going to build, almost all 10 want to do it. But the stuff that kind of brings that down is, they're going to move, or they're not going to own this thing for that long, and the complications. It's a complicated conversation. That's some of the hesitation.
Okay. So, all right. So the residential world, it really, it was no different than when I put mine on years ago. It should be even a better deal today, because the cost of installation and the cost of cells have gone down at the same time that the price of electricity has gone up. So correct. Theoretically, it should be easier to sell a residential solar roof today than it was then. And you're saying 40% increase last year, which that would indicate maybe there's some truth to that. Sounds though like the right size roof is still about the same, though, around $125, $150. That I recall, that's what it was when I did it. So, and then what about, I know again, it's going to depend on whether you get a payback from the utilities or not for energy you give to them. But what would you say is an average payback period? It was, I think, 6 or 7 years. Is that still realistic, or?
Depending on the state. So California, until April 15th of this year, probably was closer to 5 or 6 years because of the rates and the cost of power, right? And again, when you say payback period, it's kind of, so in our company, we've done thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs. 90% of them finance their system. So when you say payback, what's a little bit, I don't know, I don't want to say misleading, but the payback really is instant. If truly you are taking the same money you already gave away to the utility and just repurposing it to pay for your upgrade, it's costing you nothing. You're using the utility company money because you financed it. If you take that part of it out, California was 5 or 6 years. April 15th, they passed the law. They don't credit the same buyback rate. So if you overproduce power in the daytime that you want to use at night as credits, you get about 25% of that power back for pricing, right? About what you paid for it. So really what that's done is it's given an incentive to really push storage. Mm-hmm. and with reason. And this is, and we'll get into this conversation, I'm sure, but this is where I think Tesla will play a big part of this in the future across the country. Is solar is amazing, and it does cause real problems for the utility. Have you guys talked on the show about the duck curve before?
No.
So duck curve's a real problem. So imagine that you're in Riverside. There are literally millions of homes with solar and businesses. The sun comes up, that beautiful sun in California, it's 10 a.m. and it hits all those panels at the same time. Bam, all those solar panels start jamming power back onto the grid. The grid was never designed for this. It can't even bring in all that power easily. And then even worse is 6, 7 o'clock at night, the sun starts setting, the solar panels stop producing at almost the same time. And now you've got all this demand that instantly hits the grid. That curve comes up, drops way low, and then comes back up for demand. That gets steeper and steeper the more solar. These utilities cannot manage that demand.
Yeah.
I mean, Arizona here has the second biggest nuclear power plant in the country. It takes that system 12 hours to turn on, let alone manage demand, right? And so storage helps facilitate that. It decentralizes power, puts it in different locations. You can pull power and push power easily through batteries and storage.
Right.
And so that's what the new plans are starting to push, is storage to levelize that grid issue, to bring in grid stability. And that's happening in multiple utilities across the country. And ultimately, I think most will end up in some version of a plan like that. Yeah. And that is where I believe Tesla can do something pretty cool.
Yeah, actually, Dylan Loomis had a great interview just the other day. I think it was on Sunday, Electrified. He did a great interview with this lady from I think she's from England, but they have a consulting company, and they consult on energy worldwide. And she was pointing out that the number one use for mega pack type devices right now is these standalone utility helps, if you will, utility balancers, is the number one use for mega packs. Everybody was talking about peaker plants. But she's saying, no, the standalone that manages these demand, just the kind of stuff you're talking about, but apparently it's not just solar roofs that create this problem. They have other wind or, issues where there's too much power coming onto the grid and the grid can't handle it. And then of course, other times when you need that peaker plant. So she said that in their analysis, the number one use for megapacks, at least for the foreseeable future, will be standalone units to manage grids.
That's exactly right. She's spot on.
Okay.
So and this electrified conversation is this movement, this electrification of the United States that's sweeping the country.
Right.
The move away from fossil fuels is requiring, just like an EV, it's requiring everything we can responsibly convert to electricity and electrify is going to be the right choice. So as an example, removing traditional HVAC and moving to heat pumps, brilliant. It's happening. It will happen. $400 billion of incentives in August, a big chunk of those is for heat pumps.
Heat pumps, yeah.
That IRA bill has that specifically for heat pumps. So once you electrify, you can then manage loads correctly. So let me give you an example. And this is where I think Tesla can have a very interesting position, because I personally don't think Tesla is going to be a big producer of power. I think they're going to be in the storage, management, and distribution of power through software, through megapacks. But it gets, I think, even better. So as an example, in California today, we're testing a model with CAISO, right? Basically the California utilities. And if we have a customer that installs a battery, they can allow the utility to pull power from that battery if they need to alleviate grid issues. Mm-hmm. This is what Brian Wang alluded to this in one of your shows just a few days ago. This is the virtual power plant, VPP.
Right. You
get thousands of these millions in a location, it's a version of a utility that's ultra stable and can push and pull power. But now you start adding this electrification concept. Imagine Tesla has millions of cars plugged in the same location in Southern California, we'll call it. They've got, maybe they at this point have heat pumps installed that talk through software. And these cars that are plugged in through what's called a bidirectional charger, which is being tested today, their car battery functions as a battery that they can push and pull power. The utility will pay them for that. It's already happening today. It's being tested out in Utah and Rocky Mountain Power. ISO's testing it out right now. And so they'll have mega packs, they'll have cars, I think in the future, heat pumps, and communicate through software where they can manage loads and even out grid stability and save billions and billions of dollars doing it. And I don't think they even need to produce power with solar. So
this is my concept, and I'm sure somebody else has thought of this, but I never hear anybody talking about it. It also seems like there would be a benefit to having a what I would call a local tiny utility. In other words, if you've got a neighborhood that's already got a lot of batteries and a lot of solar roofs, putting in one mega pack for every 1,000 homes or something, that would then act as a distributor manager for that entire neighborhood, and then only draw on the utilities as necessary. Is anybody talking about something like that?
Yeah. So that's this decentralization of power. So you got to think back when utilities started forming and getting bigger in the 20s and 30s, the Fed stepped in and gave an incentive because people started complaining about pollution and these coal power, power plants. And they're like, well, get this garbage out of here. So they pushed them way out in the city. They centralized them in one location far away, built grids to distribute power. Most people, consumers don't realize this, 65% of your electric bill is transportation costs. Yes. Moving that power from where it's produced to get it to where you're at. Mm-hmm. So this decentralization of smart storage megapacks in specific locations pulls out the vast majority of transportation costs. And so you're spot on. That's exactly right. And that is in essence happening. And if it's not through megapacks, it'll be through vehicles where people sign up and say, SoCal Edison, pay me $40 a month if you pull this much power from my car. Yeah. And then they'll pull power and they'll get a paycheck for that or credit on the utility bill. That's literally happening today for standard batteries. And I think ultimately EVs will be able to participate in that. Yeah. So you're spot on. That decentralization is happening.
Okay. So we just did, I think you're talking about that show from the other day. We talked about all the different ways that Tesla is currently involved as a utility, whether they're creating power, whether they're storing it, whether they're managing it, distributing it, even having homeowners write a check because they are the actual local utility. Do you think that is a way that Tesla will be headed? Did you think that we were in the right direction on that?
I think so. I think here's where I think Tesla has run into problems with, per your question earlier, residential solar, we'll call it. Tesla, and I have a man crush on Elon Musk. There's no doubt about it. Like, I love the dude to death, and he's obsessed with efficiency. Yes. He's obsessed with stamping out what is the best one. He's constantly challenging everything all the time, and I love it. Where it breaks down in residential solar is you can go to two houses in a tract housing neighborhood, and they're exactly the same house, and they'll use completely different amounts of power. There's variations in construction, the family using the right. If someone sets their thermostat at 70 compared to 80, that's a big difference over the course of a year on how much power you consume. Yeah. And so what is hard for Tesla to do, that's this efficient machine of stamping out cars or products. It's hard to go into a home, custom design a solar system, get that thing installed and install it with all the variations that come in construction. They drilled through a roof and the roof was bad, and now they got to bring in a roofing. It's not an efficient model. So if it were me, and I think in time, it will push more towards storage, managing, distributing, using software to manage the grid and power. And it'll be less about, we don't want to deal with the residential side. I do think they're going to be very strong at they're doing mega pack installations to level out grid today. I think they can do that on the production side too. Utility scale production, they'll knock out of the park.
Yeah.
And frankly, that's the vast majority of what they need to do anyway. The residential side, they can leave to the smaller contractors, the custom kind of people. But that's what I would view as a longer term play. And I think the rest of what you guys talked about was great. Great.
So the rooftop solar, we're all familiar with the panels. We've been, watching that take place for 25 years. What about Tesla's? I guess they switched. I read something the other day or saw a video. Have they switched from a glass tile to a steel tile now?
Yeah, they're testing out a steel tile, but I think they're going back because the cost was too expensive. I've heard they're going to come back to glass, but we looked at there was one of the celebrities in AZ was looking at doing a Tesla tile roof, and we went through and modeled it out, and it's just complicated because you've got such a level of customization for that. Yeah. So the cost is at least double. What might make sense, Randy, is if they needed a new roof anyway, and they want a sleeker looking roof. Right. I think it makes sense then because you've got a tax credit on that roof portion already. Helps knock down the cost. But to just come in and sell that if the roof is fine, it's significantly more expensive. And then you've got where you don't have tiles connected that are electrically connected. You've got to get matching tiles that look like a solar tile, but it's not a solar tile. And you got to have this roofing license to do that and the electrical license to do that. And it gets a little bit complicated, which just drives up cost. And there's a market for it, but I think it's a smaller window of people that love Tesla and want a better looking home than sometimes the people that love the solar panel look, frankly.
So the market, again, that's what I do is I'm a marketer. So when the solar roof first came out, to me, I ran some numbers and it seemed like the replacement business and the new home business would have been plenty. I mean, the replacement, I forget what the numbers were, but even in the United States, you replace a roof every 25 years, something like that on average, maybe 30, but call it 25 or 30. And I forget how many homes there were in the United States. You start doing that multiplier, and just the replacement business seemed like it would have been plenty to keep them very busy. And then if you add to that, it just seems nonsensical to me to build a house today, especially in the southern states, western states, to build a house without a solar roof on it or without solar capability. But in your case, as we're talking now, with the solar tiles, if in fact they make sense economically.
Yeah, the builder conversation is a difficult one because I have a home development company in addition to energy, and frankly, on the building side, builders aren't wired to care about the long-term bill of the person living and buying the home. They want to build the home for the highest quality, cheapest price to make the margin. Right. And so unless you do something like California does, all new builds now are requiring solar. Unless you mandate it, the builders struggle to incorporate that into their sales process, feeling they're going to be outpriced by other people not doing it. So they've added options. We're seeing more builders add solar as an option for sure. There are some now actually starting to dabble into offering storage as part of the home buying process.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and what you lose when you build it in advance from the home is you lose the behavioral side of a family inside the house, meaning you don't know if you size that system properly. So you really have to scale down so you don't overcharge the customer. They might need a 10 kW, they might need a 6 or 12, depending if they had a hot tub or a welding machine or 6 kids, or my case,
3 EVs.
Exactly, 3 EVs, exactly. Yeah, so it's hard to customize that, but I'll take a standardized approach if there's better adoption or more adoption, and there's still a little bit of power that will still stabilize the grid and help people out long-term for sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what about utilities? What about manufacturers and large distribution centers, even shopping malls and Costco's and things of that nature, and government buildings? Another thing that I've been saying in my book and the Elon Musk mission, and then on this channel for, well, as long as I've been doing it and before, why isn't every government roof being covered? Why isn't every Costco being covered with solar panels? Why aren't they installing either multiple chargers or 1 megapack? I mean, it seems I had a manufacturing plant, 25,000 square feet. My utility bill was $14,000 a month. And I looked at it 25 years ago, the idea of putting solar on my roof. There was no batteries at that time, but I looked at putting solar on my roof 25 years ago. And there was some issues with doing it then. And the payout period, I think, was going to be 7 to 10 years. And I had lots of other things I could put my money into that had a shorter payback period. So that's why I didn't do it. But 20 something years later, the costs have come down, the utility bills have gone up. What's happening with that side of the equation?
It's getting more and more popular with the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act. Massive incentives for the larger scale.
30% at least, right?
Yeah, and I'll give you specifics. Like instead of 26% tax credit, they bumped it back up to 30, gave it a 10-year runway. But what they've added for commercial-based or utility scale is they've added additional incentives. If you meet some labor requirements and they're in specific areas, you can get another 10 or 20+% in tax credits.
Wow.
So if you buy and you have, I think the policy this year is 40% of your solar installation material is sourced in the US, it gives you 10% more in tax credit. 10% more, which doesn't sound like that's a huge number. And then you also can depreciate 80%. If you get 40% tax credit, you get half of that you can count as depreciation. But in that case, you could depreciate 80% of the system over 5 years. So I've got a project in Texas we're working on finalizing, and the payback period for it, 2.5 years.
Wow.
They save $9 million in cash over 25 years. 9 million cash. They paid off the system, saved another 9 million. It's a no-brainer. We had one meeting and they're like, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But kind of like the residential side, it breaks down on, do they own the building? Are they going to be there for a longer period of time? Solar's not easy to install and uninstall. It's expensive. You got to rewire the whole thing. It's pricey to do. So they got to be there in the long haul. So you're seeing bigger companies. Walmart's done a bunch. You're seeing Home Depots and Costco's actually do some too. Okay. So we're seeing these dotted out, and payback periods are in the couple of years.
Wow.
Incentives. And so I think that will be the biggest sector to grow ultimately, will be utility scale, commercial industrial power will grow quite a bit. Resi will be fine, but it's such a small number, you know?
So then in France, or is it all of the Eurozone, they now are requiring it's either all new parking lots, car parking lots, or maybe it's all parking lots over a certain size to have solar parking covers on them. It's once again, I know we have just down the street from me. I'm just a couple of blocks from University of California at Riverside. They have their parking lots covered with these solar panels. The church I go to has the panels over the parking lot. Is that a good deal? Can people get good return on that, or is that just hey, I want to feel good, so I'll put that up?
Yeah, right. And in reality, some people put it up because they want to position their company as a green company or their organization, right? But if you are going to do parking structures, it would be ridiculous not to do them with solar, because the structure itself that supports the solar, based on your accountant, right? But the vast majority qualify the entire structure for a tax credit. Wow. So let's say you're getting just the regular 30% tax credit. You got 30% off your parking structure. So if you're already doing it, you may as well put solar in. And it's super inexpensive to do it now. You are going to pay for it anyway. So that does make a ton of sense. And in some cases, we run out of space and we add parking structures just to add additional solar to businesses or big companies that want it. So yeah, it makes a ton of sense. For the Europe side, I don't know much on that policy itself, but I do know European countries are following suit with requirements for storage as well. Germany's got an incredible virtual power plant system set up. In fact, I can't remember if it was Exxon or Shell actually just bought this from them, and there were 30,000 batteries in homes that functioned like a utility. Europe is a little bit ahead of the game from us on solar and batteries and storage and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so then then let's talk about the utility level, the solar farm. I'm guessing that the thing out in the desert where they concentrated the beam, that was a one and done or three and done or whatever it was. I'm not hearing about any more of those being created, but the solar farm seems to be the thing. Bunch of different methods over the canal, I guess in California, over waterways and other situations, over farmland where you now get mixed use. You get the farm still producing as well as the solar panels. In combination with wind and solar, maybe sometimes even still getting use of the farmland underneath. It seems like there's a lot of innovation taking place in the utility size farm, if you will, and that there's a lot of growth there. Now, my investigation, the thing that I did learn was that the main reason that there weren't more of those kind of deployments was that they were waiting for batteries, that there just wasn't enough batteries. And so there was a lot of stuff on paper, a lot of stuff that was ready to put through the process of getting permitted and whatnot, but they didn't want to do it until they had the battery storage and management to go with it. So anyway, with all of that said, now I've exposed all of my knowledge on the subject. Tell me, A, what do you see in terms of this farm, solar farms, and also how does Tesla fit into that part of the project?
Yeah. So I think the larger scale you get on solar, the lower cost it is per watt to produce, right? You can install it for cheaper to a point. There is some diminishing returns once you get super large, but yes. So what I'm seeing is on the utility scale side or large commercial side, specifically if there's dual purpose, I mean, they're already doing something and they can put solar to it, they get the benefit of the tax credits, right? For the people that pay taxes. So as an example, the canal one is interesting because we looked at testing a pilot in Arizona to do a canal system here with one utilities that kind of got held up and didn't progress super far. But the reason we had pitched it to them is not just can you have solar on land that is not using, but it provides safety with things and people falling into the canal itself. Additionally, they lose so much in evaporation that there'd be a vapor barrier that would keep evaporation down as part of it, and they would retain more of the water. And that's what got their mind kind of going is there's these.
And there was a third thing. The cool water beneath cools the panels, which makes them more efficient.
Better production. Yes, well said. And that is right. And so I think some of that you're going to see as people get more innovative. I've looked at some tech that there were tiles that were replacement for asphalt for roads.
Oh, okay.
And if you do tile and you string them properly, meaning each tile has its own small inverter system, like a microinverter, then they don't have to be all open, right? Because traditional systems run like a Christmas tree set of lights where if you unplug one light, the whole strand doesn't work. And so cars on the roads, but this thing had solar on it. And additional on top was LED lighting, meaning you could change, it never had to be restriped. You could change the patterns. Too costly today, right? But kind of cool to think down the road. But I do think on the utility scale side, combined with storage, you're spot on. The storage is what makes utility scale solar really give great payback because they can alleviate the higher demand time. So if a utility has to pull power from a corresponding utility that they buy power from and share loads with, right? Like I think very few don't have that. Texas doesn't really share with people, which is why they have issues down there, but most share with other utilities. If they can produce a solar farm and add multiple megapacks from a Tesla standpoint, right? They don't have to buy power at 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 times. Utilities are not kind to each other. When you need more power, they hurt you, man. They really squeeze you. And so it pulls that all that pressure down. The returns are significant when you take away those incredibly high costs. And so I view that's something Tesla will become very good at and master because they're good at stamping out something that's very good. So they can say, hey, if it's a 1 square mile, here's the system, go put it in. It's hard on the home side because every home is different, all customized. But I think they'll master and become very good at utility scale.
Wow. Okay. So that's super interesting. So do you imagine if you want to think outside the box, is Tesla got a skunk work someplace where they are working on solar cells or some kind of wild inventive thing? I know I saw the other day where somebody's now got these clear solar cells, like a thin strip of material that can go. I forget what they were. I think they were using it as instead of windows or something on certain kind of applications. Anyway, do you think Tesla cares about that side of it?
About producing solar? I don't think so. They looked at buying. They ended up cutting a deal years back with a company called Trina, I think it was. They looked at buying a plant, but when I personally believe, because Elon is so committed to be vertical in all his industries, control from start to finish. We need to get manufacturing for wafers, sell stuff here. There's only a few places. I think there's like 9 places in the world you can buy silicon that's solar grade ready, right? Like that you can mine to solar grade. And so I think he'll hesitate, and Tesla will hesitate, because it's going to be tough to be fully vertical and produce panels. But to buy it with their buying power, I think it's probably a better use of heartbeats, not to try to get into that business today, do utility scale and produce mega packs, because the true producing power is not the hard part. The hard part is getting it to the right locations, right? Storing it and distributing it and managing it. So imagine this in the future we'll take that Texas example. Solar's, Tesla software is out there. They're seeing demand rise because they've got so many installations of power walls. They've got mega packs. They can tell. They can in advance shift power to locations that are starting to increase faster than any utility can today. Yeah. They'll shift that distribution of electricity at a local level. On top of that, they can ping cars, and the cars that are in with bidirectional chargers will alleviate grid strain. Their Tesla car owners will get a small paycheck from the utility for that. They'll shut down demands from heat pumps through software and say, hey, in 2 hours, it's going to be high demand here because it's coming this way. They'll pre-cool the house, shut it off during the high demand time to lower demand, all working simultaneously without having to do anything. It's all software driven. No person has to touch anything, and it levelizes the entire grid. I think that's a future for Tesla to dominate in, and that's where I see them moving towards personally.
Yeah. So last question, and it's kind of far afield for you, but as a solar man, you probably have very strong opinions and probably agree with Brian Wong on this. But Brian says wind is a temporary solution. The wind idea will be dead in 10 years.
I mostly agree. Yeah, wind is hard. So for wind, you've got to produce so much more, have the capacity to produce so much more, because you've got to capitalize on when it's windy. Yeah, let me put it this way. I know the sun's coming up every single day. Right. There might be some clouds occasionally, but it's fairly consistent. Wind is less consistent, so you've got to have more storage, more cost. Solar is much more reliable, much more consistent, and frankly, it's much more efficient. There's no moving parts to solar. Yep. Wind turbines, you've got moving parts, you've got repair, you've got service, you've got birds, right, that really hate us for that. And so it's long-term, I believe Brian is accurate with that statement for sure.
Yeah, his one of his big concerns was he said he thought that it creates its own weather. And that eventually they're going to figure out with some of these really big installations that it's actually creating a weather system of its own, which could actually throw off some of the weather systems that are in existence. And that isn't crazy. I saw this YouTube video a while back that was trying to figure out why London had such a big smog problem sometimes and not other times. And it turned out to have to do with the weather off the coast of Africa. They were able to show that the weather off of Africa, as depending on the kind of year they were having, that was affecting the, who knows what, the currents in the ocean. I can't remember, but whatever it was ending up creating inversions in London that were trapping the smog. So his idea that a massive wind turbine, and some of these new ones are just enormous, that could be actually creating some kind of a weather issue downstream.
Well, I could see that, because you've got, I mean, weather is really movement of heat, right? I mean, it's transfer of heat and low pressure and high pressure, which moves heat. Yeah. And so I'd imagine if you start to mess around with that a little bit, you could start changing weather. That I've never thought about it. Brian is probably on a scale of 1 to 100. He's 100 times smarter than me. So I trust his opinion.
Yeah, me too.
Right? It's two of us.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. Well, I think you've satisfied 99% of my questions. I'm hoping to have the consultant from England on my show as well. If you're listening, you want to come on my show to amplify what Babe has just gone through. But most of the questions I think have been answered, other than maybe some of the issues that might have to do with the worldwide picture. And some of those issues that she would be more able to give us insight into. But anyway, Babe, great having you on board. You have definitely knocked it out of the park. Glad that we were able to clear up a lot of these issues, and maybe we can have you on again in a couple of months as a follow-up once I've heard the comments and seen how people respond to the video.
Yeah, happy to do it, and thanks for having me.
Okay. Hey, listen, if you like that kind of content, hit the like button. If you want to subscribe and hit notify, you'll get notified of all the really cool content that's coming up this week. And then, of course, there is always the Patreon channel. So if you got $5 that you don't know what to do with right now, hit Patreon and help support the channel. Again, thank you, Babe. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.
Click the link below to get your paperback, Kindle, or audiobook now.